Hello, folks. Welcome to another week of Learning to Linux. My name is Manny. Let's get into it. This week we're going to be learning about networking and specifically how to set up a Linux operating system to network. So the first thing we got to start talking about is IP addressing. So your IP address is one of the things that allows your device, your network interface card, to talk onto the network. There are four things that you have to configure on your NIC in order to communicate on the network. There is the IP address. We'll get into that in a second. The net mask, the gateway, and a name server. A name server allows you to communicate via names, not IP addresses. So what is an IP address? We're going to talk about IPv4, not IPv6. IPv4 is a 32-bit dotted decimal number that you use to address every NIC that's on a network. Your network or subnet is defined by your subnet mask. Your subnet mask tells your network interface card how many or how big your network is, how many devices there are, and what your network address is out of your IP address. So your IP address is what's called a 32-bit dotted decimal number and broken up into 4 octets. Let me show you your address. So I'm going to use a couple of commands today to do some modifying of your network. The old way is what's called ifconfig. Still works. They are deprecating it, so I think eventually it's going to leave the Linux operating system, but we'll see how that goes. And you'll notice that there is what's called the device up here. This is what my network card's name is, and then this is called loopback. This is for testing purposes, your own device, and you'll notice that we have an IP address of 127.0.0.1. If you try to connect to that, you're connecting to yourself, and you'll see that the net mask is 255.0.0.0. This means that we're using the first octet, and it's a class A network, and so everything behind that is considered in that subnet or network. This, which is my network card itself, is 10.0.2.15. We're on a virtual machine, so this is kind of one of those different types of networks that's on a private network. So anything that starts with 10 dot is going to be a private IP address that you can use anywhere internally as long as your network is set up for it. The net mask for this device is 255.255.255.0. So this means that the net mask is saying we're going to use all first 3 octets as my network and the last one as my host. So the host, meaning that I can have 0 to 255 in my host. The 0 portion of my network, so if I went 10.0.2.0, that is defining what the network identifier is. If I use 255, that is identifying the broadcast of this network right here. So this device has an IP address of 10.0.2.15, a mask of 255.255.255.0, and then the broadcast address is 255 of that subnet. So the subnet is 10.0.2.0 for this NIC. We'll show you the gateway in a second, which is what we call our route. Might as well use that command now. Not only can you view configuration settings with ifconfig, but you can actually make changes to your network card. So right now we're set up for DHCP. We'll get into that a little later, actually in another video. The route is what we call your gateway, or your gateway of last resort. Your default gateway, which is the device that allows you to communicate off of your subnet, should be 0.0.0 is the mask, the gateway, and then it should point to whatever router is used for this network. and I don't see it set in here. So default is configured in another location. We'll have to go find that in a second. So it's typically 10.0.2.1 allows you to get off of your network, and that should be default. So default is defined in a config file, and we'll go find that in a bit. The other thing that I'd like to show you is another way to configure your network card, which is nmcli. So a newer method, a newer tool, command line, is to use the nmcli command, and we get pretty much the same information, almost. So you'll notice that there's a few other numbers in here. inet6 means this is the IPv6 address of your card. inet means it's just the IPv4 of your card. The Ethernet address, or your MAC address, is right here. A MAC address of your network interface card is like the serial number of your card. So it's what we call layer 2 addressing, and it runs on the switch portion of your network. So here we're going to show a little bit more information with nmcli, just the default. And it shows the MAC address, it shows the name of it, it shows the default. So also we have inet4 is my IP address, and you'll notice that there's a /24. This /24 tells me that my mask is using the first 3 octets. 888 is 24 bits out of the 32 bits, meaning that's 255, 255, 2550 as a net mask. And then we have other, this is a route for /20, the subnet. This is a default route. This is another route that's in here for 169 addresses, and this is IPv6. We're not going to worry about IPv6 tonight. It's a large hexadecimal number. DNS servers, or name servers, are set up also. So this is my Cox is my internet service provider, and these are set up in here for this interface. So some of the other things that we can do is nmcli. Shoot, I had my notes here. Oh, device. If you need to find out more information about how to use a command, always use the man command. And it'll tell you how to use the command. It'll give you all the different types of options. And also in the bottom here, it'll show you some examples of how to use it when we get to that port. Where's your examples? And typically you can turn things off, you can turn things on. In a server method, I really wouldn't shut things off or turn things on, but you might be able to change routes, that sort of thing. The only time you would want to configure a device is when you're setting it up in the first part. So you could set up a static address for your network interface card, which would mean all servers usually need to have a static address. And this is because they're on 24/7, and you never want the IP address to change. If you're using DHCP, which is an automatic configuration of your network interface card, then it may change while you're and if something happens to the DHCP server, it could release or renew your address for your server to a different IP address. Can happen. Does it happen often? No, but it's a possibility, and you never want that to happen on a production server. So you always statically assign a IP address on a network interface card. So we're going to use the DEV command first, and we're just going to show, but this is how you would run it. So you'd do nmcli device modify, and then you'd have to name the device. What are you going to do? And then we would do IPv4, and then we do .address, and then give it an IPv4 address, and then you'd have to do IPv4.netmask and give it the netmask. And then one of the other things you would have to do is device modify, and you put it in the same line, but we would put in IPv4 method and manual, because that's the static way to do it. So let's go see if I can show you the first part of that. nmcli device show, and it shows me on my devices, and my device is the ENP0S3. So I can do nmcli device, and I would do modify, and then I would put that guy there. Oops, paste. And then I would put IPv4.adr, and then if I wanted to modify it, I would just put 10.0.2. That's my subnet. And if I wanted to change my IP address, I would put in whatever IP address I wanted to put in here. Let's put in 199, and then we could continue with this, or I could actually just type in help. Sorry, that should configure it, but I'm not going to add that. It would change my IP address, and I don't want my IP address changed right now. Maybe it won't change it because we're already set up for the automatic method. So that would be how we would change it. And there are other things we can use with the nmcli. So device, you have to know the device name, you have to know the IP address that you want to get it, and typically you would get the IP address from your network administrator. The other thing is there's connections. And we should be able to show our connection. This is the wired connection. There's a thing called a UUID, which identifies the unique user identifier, I think, for the device. It's Ethernet, and this is the device name if you wanted to find out the device name. So when you're running your other commands, you can actually see that. I think there's one other we're going to do is nmcli, and it is general and status. This should tell us about our devices. Okay, so you can also enable or disable your devices. So these are your Wi-Fi WAN, your Wi-Fi hardware, and typically sometimes you're having a problem with your Wi-Fi and you want to shut it off. You can go in and use the nmcli device and disable. The other way to do IP address statically assigning and get information about it is the IP command. So for the IP address or the IP command, if we wanted to add an address, we use IP address add, and we'd have to type it in. So we'd put 10 dot what is it, 0 dot 12 dot or 2 dot and we 199 again, and then we'd have to go device, and then we'd have to put in our the device name that we have, and that would be it. I'd hit enter, and I'd add that address to the config of my network interface card. And I'm not going to do that now. It would change my address, but that is one way to use this. You can also do instead of adding, we can do I think it's link and show, and this should show us our links. It gives us a little different method of showing stuff, and then we can do I think it's link, and then we do the set, and I think it's device. We'd have DB, and we'd have to put the paste in here, and we can do down, and that would turn off my internet. Oops, I'd have to do sudo in front of it because we're doing And so that turned my internet off. And then if we do up, that should turn it on. And that is the way we disable enable our network interface card using the IP command. There is one other thing that I wanted to show you that we can do a couple of ways. And using the IP command, we can do route, and I believe it's show. And this shows us the routes that are currently set up for our devices. So the default route is set to 10.0.2.2. Remember earlier I was saying is .1. You can choose either of these. So you can then do add a route, show IP route, add device, IP address, and so you can add the route using the IP command, or we can use a default command. Instead of using IP, there is another command that we can use, and it's called route. So the route command is right here, and we can add a route or delete a route any way we want. So to use the route command to view your routes is just to type in the route. But if we wanted to add a route to ours, we need a little bit of information. What network we want to use, the net mask of that. So it's like what size subnet is it? And then which interface do we want to route to? So if you had multiple interfaces on your server, you could route certain networks out certain interfaces. So the route command, actually we got to do sudo in front of it, and then we would do the route command, and then we want to add, and it's a network, so we do net, and then we put in the IP address. Let's just use 3.0, and then we're going to do a net mask of 255.255.255.0, which is a class C, and we're going to route it out device, and it's going to be the ENP0S3, and without the colon on the end of it. And now this should add a route to our routing table. Means it tells the device, the network interface card, to anytime it sees an address going to 10.0.3. anything, that means a class C. So 1 to 254, go out this device, meaning go out this network interface card. And if I do route command again to show, you see that the 2.3 has shown up. Now I don't need that anymore, so my default route goes out that same location. I'm going to delete that, so I'm just going to do the up arrow, and then instead of doing the add command, I'm going to use the delete command. And this should delete that route, and it's no longer there. So that's using the route command to add another route to your routing table, meaning that the network interface card needs to know how to send things out. The default gateway is the main way that your NIC sends packets out of your device, your PC, your phone, whatever it is, to the internet or the other networks. And that router that you're pointing to knows how to send packets beyond, because it has a default route, and so on and so on. So default route to default route to default route until it finds the network that you're looking for. And once it finds that network, then it knows how to send the packet directly to that device. And then what will happen is the packet will come back from that other device using default routes or a static. Once the route pattern has been established, all those routers in between know this traffic. So then the next packet is quicker and quicker. And so it just constantly goes back and forth until the conversation is over. And then what's called a cache or routing cache will then be, has a certain time frame, and it clears out until you want to communicate again. So it's like so many seconds that it will kind of clear itself out. One of the other things I wanted to show you is what's called the hostname CTL command. This, oh, did I type it in right? No, I did not. Fat fingered it. Hostname CTL tells you information about the machine that you're running on, and it's basically the host name of the machine. and the version of Linux that you're running and the kernel of Linux that you're running, and basically architecture, x86 64. What's important about this is the other thing that you have to have on your device is a host name. What's important about a host name is typically it gets configured when you're building your operating system. If you do not like that, you can change that. But once you have a host name in, let's say, a database, like a resource database, Microsoft Active Directory, you typically do not want to change your host name. This will mess things up, like security identifiers. There's unique tokens that are established once you connect a device to a database like that. So we typically don't like to change the host name very often. For a client PC, not too much of a problem, but there can be some issues associated with it. So when you're first setting it up, it's okay to change maybe once or twice and then don't change it again. You have to have an individual host name, meaning that no two host names can be the same on the same network, meaning the same subnet. So the IP address and host name kind of go together when they're communicating on the network. And MAC addresses never repeat. You never want to have a duplicate MAC address on your network. Duplicate IPs are another problem too. But configuring things on a network to run, you need a host name individually. You need an IP address. You need a network mask. You need a gateway. And then you need a name server if you want to talk on the internet. How do you find that you're on the network? So your CLI, you don't have a browser, you don't want, like, how do I know that I'm running on the network? We use a tool for this to check to see if my network is working. So if I can communicate, and let's say I know I'm connected to the internet and I want to verify that, we use a command called ping. Ping is to see if another device is active on our network. And so we use ping, and let's just say www.google.com. This will test everything in my line from my local network all the way to the internet, my router, my internet service provider, and my DNS settings. So I'm getting a reply back from Google, and I'm going to hit the Control-C to stop it. It'll just continuously run. And this tells me some information about my network connection. It says I'm sending 64 bytes packets, and it's going to this device, which is IP address this, and this is for Google. So Google, I ping it, my DNS is coming back as this IP address. So I'm going to send information to that. And the protocol we're using is ICMP. And then time to live is 117, so it has 117 router hops that it can survive. And this is my average response time of that packet, meaning the amount of data that's going there, 64 bytes, and 64 bytes back, is taking 26 milliseconds. And so 26 milliseconds is pretty good, depending on where that Google is. But so I have a speed test a little bit. It's telling me my response time. It's telling me my DNS is working because it's converting Google to an IP address, which I know that's working, and my internet provider is working so I can get out there. So if I'm having problems, I would have to search somewhere else. If these numbers were up over like 200, I would start to worry that I'd have some slowness going on, and I'd have to do some other network test. But by default, a ping is a good test to see if my network connectivity is going and my DNS is set up properly. One of the other things to test to see if you are not connecting to the internet but you want to connect to your local network, what you would ping instead of Google is your gateway. And so we know that my gateway, my VM gateway, is 10.0.2.2. So I should be able to ping that. So if I couldn't ping that, then I would do is ping what? I would ping myself. So I am 15. I should be able to ping myself. This is my loopback. So what else is my loopback address? Remember in the beginning of the video I said something? So I can ping, and I can ping 127.0.0.1. And this tells me that my loopback address is working, which usually means that my network interface card is on, it's active, and I can ping myself. So that means usually my driver is set up, the software is working, the operating system is seeing the network card itself, and it's working the way it should. So in retrospect, or in the basics understandings of networking, you have a way of configuring your network card. You have a way, multiple ways. You can use ivconfig, which is the old way, which should be deprecated in a year or so. Then you have the nmcli. Then you have IP, and you have to know some things before you go and configure them. IP address, subnet mask, gateway, and name servers that you're going to use. Otherwise, like a client, like a device, a regular user's device, can be what's called DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. That is another video, and I will see you later and talk to you on Monday night.